just to get through the end of the day. It hardly ever even happens, but I go to sleep the same anyway.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Altenberg. I'm the Internet Evangelist at Apple Computer. Sometimes I wonder what this means to be Internet Evangelist. I don't think I really need to evangelize the Internet to any of you. Rather, I'm the contact person for developers who are developing on the Internet at Apple. And hopefully I can help you out with your Internet development in the future. If anything, we probably need to do some evangelism internally at Apple and get ourselves more adapted to the Internet. And I think that's underway. I've seen a lot of signs recently. We've done our open enrollment for insurance in the last month, and that was all based on the web with web forms, and that was great to see. And we're probably going to be off Apple Inc. by the end of the year, which is another great move. And really moving towards Internet-based mail. So we'll be basing our business on the Internet and hopefully solving many of the problems and issues along the way. What I want to talk about today is the deliver side of the story. You've heard in Larry Tesler's talk that we sort of divided up the developer opportunities in the create, deliver, and access pieces, and we'll talk about delivery here. And here's the Internet playground that you have today, starting with a couple of sandboxes that have been kind of the success story of the Internet. The net client and the net server, basically the web browser and web server, that have now become ubiquitous and really allowed the Internet to become the hotbed of development that it's become. And by enhancing these a little bit, we've added plugins to the net client and leveraged the sort of ubiquitous network capability of the client and server out a little bit further and created a perhaps even more compelling sandbox to play in by allowing you to develop on a smaller scale and add pretty important features to the client-server story here. And what we're going to get into today is another emerging area, which is the client or the server-side plugin. And this further allows you to add on in a sort of component manner in some ways to, again, to the net server and net client story. So here to talk about these server components are Robin Marteris from Apple, and he's going to discuss EG, Apple EG, the new vTwin CGI that we're working on. And after that will be Chuck Schotten from Quarterdeck, who I think a lot of you know as the WebStar creator, and he'll be showing the new WS API. So, Robin?
Thank you. Like you mentioned, my name is Robin Marteris. I work at Apple Computer, and I belong to a group at Apple it's been around for about a year called Cybertech. And what Cybertech is supposed to be doing is creating technologies for the Internet, both on the server and client side. We have our own web page up, which URL's up on the screen here, www.cybertech.apple.com. Now, on this website, you'll find all the latest technologies that Apple has created to make webmasters as well as people who want to develop for the Internet with all the different tools and various different goodies that we put up there for people. I highly recommend that you write this down someplace and go look at it as often as possible, because we'll be putting new stuff up on a regular basis. My job today is to talk to you about searching on the Internet. There's been a lot of the big companies doing searching, and there's been a lot of little companies doing searching, but everybody wants to search on the internet because that's the only way you can find anything. In the past, at Apple anyway, what we've had is a product called Apple Search. And Apple Search was developed 3 to 4 years ago, and it was designed to be able to search things on a LAN. It was not designed to work on the internet because the internet wasn't very big at the time. It was an ideal LAN product. You can connect to a server from various different clients, both on Windows or on Mac, and you can index your documents no matter what format they were in, whether they were text or Word or whatever format they were, you can index them and allow people to search them. It had all kinds of advanced features, including reporters that allow you to create little agents to do searching for you offline so that you can just say, I'm interested in these kinds of documents. Let me know when they appear on the server, which are all great features. But again, it was not optimized for the internet. It was basically for LANs. Well, when the internet became big and web servers started coming around, people said, well, we need something to be able to search our website. So we said, okay, we have this product called Apple Search. Let's see what we can do to make it work on the internet. So we wrote a CGI for WebStar that allows you to search your Apple Search databases. And again, this wasn't the greatest solution just because Apple Search wasn't designed for the internet. And various relative links didn't work afterwards. You have cryptic URLs to create files or to retrieve files that you found on the internet. So what we did today was use a technology that was generated in Apple's ATG group called vTwin. You probably heard vTwin in various different other talks at the developer conference today. vTwin was designed to work with macOS 8. But it is pretty much production quality today. And because that is the case, we decided to write a CGI around the vTwin engine. We call it Apple EG. EG stands, of course, for Latin for example. And I'll show you in a demo later why that applies. Again, it delivers future macOS technologies today. So some of the things that were designed for macOS 8 are almost ready and are ready to be used today. And so we decided to go ahead and do that. It is completely optimized for the internet. It knows all about HTML. It knows about URLs. It runs as a CGI for WebStar. And it is available today, or you'll be able to download it from our website probably by Monday. There's been about 100 websites, commercial websites, that are currently using EG as beta testers. It's got a very focused feature set, which basically means that what it does today is it takes your website, indexes the documents on your website, and allows people to search it using their favorite web browser. I'll talk to you later about what we may do about it, expanding that in the future. So let me go ahead and walk over and show you the demo. What we have here is just a standard Mac machine, which can be run as a web server. When you first download it, you just get this application called eg.acgi. It's very easy to set up. You just double-click it. Double-click it, and nothing happens. And the machine hangs. There we go. The first time it'll bring up your favorite Apple license agreement. You agree to it, and the first time, because you haven't done anything with it yet, it will automatically set it up. And so it'll ask you where your WebStar is. And currently it's not running, so it'll ask you to launch it. So I have WebStar down here. I'll launch it. And then when it's got to do a little math. And after it comes up, the auto setup dialog continues. It has now figured out exactly where WebStar is, where your documents are for your website. What it'll do is set the EG root folder to be wherever your WebStar application is. It'll create an alias to EG in case you don't have EG in the WebStar folder. You can have it anywhere you want. It'll automatically update your index every day at midnight. And it will now go ahead and index everything on your website. So you click Setup, off it goes, indexes your website. There we're done. And now when people go with their web browser to your website, they can search for documents on your website. It's that easy to set up. Now let me show you a website out in the real world who's actually using this. let's see, I got Netscape here somewhere. This site is Gallup High School, which is a high school in New Mexico that likes to use the very latest Apple technologies. And this is one of them. It was a little bit slow about an hour ago when I checked it. We'll see how fast it responds this time. Okay, if you can follow the pointer here real quick, the things that are between here and here are things that the CGI generates. Everything else, the stuff on the top and the stuff on the bottom, are headers and footers, which you can create from a template file. So this query dialog here, this query portion here is actually generated by Apple EG itself. So we can search for things like Gallup, show the results in table format, and the results come back. And it shows the relevance ranked hit list, and the scores over here on the left. The title tag shows up the document here with the URLs. You can click and go directly to the document. Short abstract of the document that you found is shown here, and then the full URL or the relative URL depending on what the administrator set up. What's nice about EG and about vTwin itself, it has a lot of powerful features in it, and among them is the ability to find by similarity or find by example, which is where EG came from. You can say, I like this document that we found and this document that we found. Find me other documents that are similar to those two. And it goes off and does another search. And I found 97 documents that were like those two that I selected. And it shows you here over here on the right which words it used to determine that these documents really are similar to the one that we selected before. In addition to that, you can say, well, I like this document and I like this document, but I want those documents that are like that one, but also contain the word football. Create a new search with those parameters, and it goes off and does a search and returns you a hit list with those parameters. So this is all, fine and dandy, but that's basically the functionality that's built into EG. I'm going to go ahead and go back and show you some more slides now. So what do we want to do with EG in the future? Again, I've talked about EG is based on vTwin. vTwin is a technology that will be available in future releases of the Mac OS. In the meantime, we have Apple EG, which uses vTwin as a static library built in into the application. What we're going to be adding to EG, and we need a lot of feedback for this because we haven't completed this yet, is that we're going to be providing you with a SDK, a set of APIs for EG. One of them will be supporting the full text retrieval Apple Event Suite, which allows any application on the outside to basically do searches. You don't have to be a web server to use EG to search the documents that were indexed. Again, EG is flexible enough that you can basically index any documents on your server or on your machine. They don't have to be necessarily based on your web server. And there'll also be a plugin API, which will allow you to add functionality to EG. Right now, EG will only index documents that are on your machine. You can't go off and say, go index documents on this web server, or go index documents that are in this FileMaker Pro database. We will be providing plugin API that allows you to write plugins to write web crawlers and various other things. Also, there are several other searching tools available on the internet right now based on the Mac that have some very good features. There's some people that already have written web crawlers. Some people have written very, very good remote administration tools. We don't have any of those in EG right now. And so we're providing APIs for you to be able to create remote administration and various other functionalities to be able to search things. vTwin itself, like I said, will be available sometime in the future, probably in the form of a shared library. There's no dates for which version of OS that'll be available at this time. Again, opportunities for you is to be able to write remote administration, web crawlers, be able to extract text from databases and so on. And then, of course, add the functionality that Apple Search had to be able to extract text from different file formats that are not straight text. Again, I admonish you to go to our website, to get the latest version of EG and also the latest news on its development and APIs. Also, very shortly there will appear an email address where you can email us and give us your requirements that you need to be able to develop for EG and for vTwin as well. And that's all I have to say at this time. We'll turn time over to Chuck.
Good afternoon. I'm Chuck Schotten from QuarterDeck Corporation. We were going to talk about the WebStar API, but I've decided that I'm having a post-lunch food coma, and we'll just turn down the house lights and have a little nap for 30 minutes. No, seriously, we're going to talk about a really neat new thing that's going to be available to people that are in this room right after this presentation, and that is the new WebStar API that's going to be available in the next release of WebStar. What I'd like to talk about first is just what is this API? What's it good for? Why do you want to use it? And then we'll do some demos of the technology. First of all, it's a high-performance interface to the whole WebStar class of web servers. And what that means is that you can use it from the standard WebStar application, the secure version, and a lower-end intro product that we announced on Monday, which I'll have some more details on in a minute. The nice thing about the WebStar API is that it's a portable API. We provide the tools to make it possible to develop a plugin on a Macintosh, and then just by recompiling and linking on a new machine, you get a cross-platform plugin for use with a Netscape server or a Microsoft server. But the really powerful thing about this, and it's something that's been a little bit more difficult to do with the traditional Apple event, Apple script, external application CGI model, is that it's a very easy way to build custom web applications that work with your existing application. So instead of having to support a whole new Apple event suite, you can build a piece of code that plugs right into the server and take advantage of the server communications that WebStar provides. From a high-level overview, the API is divided into three parts. We have the WebStar server, or whatever server the WebStar API is being used with, that exists as one application. And then there's a runtime interface, some sort of dynamic linking that takes some server-specific API glue and the source code that you've written to implement whatever logic that your plugin will do, and hook that in at runtime. This interface down here is a standard interface, which is the WebStar API itself, and it's a compile time interface. It's bound with this server-specific glue to give you a self-contained plugin that runs with whatever server you're intending to talk to. Contrast this with the old web server CGI model, where you had an application that was a server, and then you had several separate applications that were the individual CGIs. And you used some form of inter-process communication, whether it was pipes on a Unix box or Apple events on a Macintosh or some other invocation mechanism like a text file under Windows. In the case of plugins, you've got the web server and all the plugins running in the same process space. They're in the same shared memory space. They're using the same CPU resources. So they don't contend with each other nearly as much as a bunch of external applications all fighting with each other for CPU time and access to system resources. Relies on whatever dynamic linking facilities available within your operating system environment. The features and advantages of this plugin, particularly over CGIs, but also over other API standards that are out there. First of all, it is a replacement for CGI applications. Most people who have existing CGIs will find that it's very, very easy to convert a CGI into a plugin, and it actually makes your code much simpler. You get rid of the application-specific code, all the hassles of having to do threading and Apple event management. They just all go away. So it's a quite a bit simplified process, which makes your code more reliable. There's less stuff to have to worry about testing, and there's less stuff to break. In terms of the battle of the APIs, people are going to ask, "Oh my God, not one more API. Why do we want to do this one as opposed to one of the other ones that are out there?" We very carefully looked at all of the existing standards and the proposed standards. And when WebStar API came into being, the only other proposed standard at the time was Netscape's API. And so as time has gone along and Microsoft came out with their version, we've tried to incorporate all of the functionality that these other APIs provide into the WebStar API. So we have a superset of functions so that if you want a cross-platform API, you can write to the lowest common denominator. But if you want to take advantage of the special features on the Macintosh, you can use the full set of services that are available. in a WebStar implementation on a Macintosh, we use the code fragment manager to tie in the plugin with the server. The server provides a whole set of callbacks to your plugin so that a lot of the more complicated functions related to traditional CGI processing, TCP/IP communications, memory management, things like that, are actually handled on your behalf by the server, and you can just make a few simple subroutine calls to have these things implemented for you in your plugin. A plugin gets to be able to do all the same things that a CGI can do, plus a whole bunch more stuff. Some of the things that you might have relied on an external logging application to do, or some of the things that you just may not have been able to do in the past at all. Because the plugin runs in shared global space with your application, you don't have the communications overhead of dealing with Apple events. You don't have the user confusion of, gosh, how do I get this separate application running and make sure that it's up and running all the time, and that I've got my process linking set up and all the other stuff that goes along with standalone CGIs. So you've got this shared global space with the server. It's also shared global space between multiple invocations of your plugin. So you can do some neat things with that, and we'll show a demo of that in a little bit later. And you also, in your plugin, have access to your own resources and your own private information, so you can have persistent settings and pre-rendered HTML and things like that that you might want to serve. Back on the portability issue a little bit, how is this thing really portable? Why is this really a superset API, and why do you want to use it to do plugin development across potentially multiple servers? The API itself is a compile time API. There are runtime glue layers that will allow you to plug this into any of the other types of servers. Right now, there is a glue layer for WebStar API, and we have a demonstration version of the glue layer for the ISAPI standard, which is used with Microsoft servers. And we have, by the time the final version is released for the 2.0 version of WebStar, we want to have the support in there for the INSAPI plugins as well. A little graphical overview to take that first slide to a little more detail. In the case of WebStar, we have the WebStar server. The code fragment manager is our dynamic runtime interface. And the interface down here, the compile time interface, is WSAPI, and we have WSAPI glue. As a developer, you can change the color of the box in the middle, and you instantly get an INSAPI plugin. The glue would be specific to talking to a Netscape server. Your code that you wrote down here at the bottom is still written to the WebStar API, same compile time interface. The runtime interface is now either a shared library on Unix or some sort of DLL mechanism under Windows NT or Windows 95. And the same is true for the ISAPI interface that's provided by the Microsoft server. There's a glue layer in here that your standard plugin code is written to. So if you're careful when you implement these plugins, you can actually get one source code base to run across multiple platforms and do simultaneous releases to all the popular web servers that are available. Some of the things that you might want to do with a plugin instead of perhaps a traditional CGI, webify any existing Macintosh application. That's kind of a funny marketing-esque term. In reality, what it means is that in the past, you had to have a set of additional Apple events that your application may have supported, and you had to make sure that you were running in a mode that was compatible with the web server. In the case of plugins, you can actually put specific pieces of your application's code right inside of the web server and communicate with the HTTP client directly into your application, so that you can render information and present it right out to a web client from inside of whatever your current application is without having to go through all the hoops of implementing your own TCP/IP communications, your own HTTP protocol handshakes, and all of that stuff. Of course, you can implement your traditional C-based CGIs with this, and there are plans to have a Pascal version of the interfaces as well. There's not one in the beta software development kit that's going to be made available today, but it's a very simple matter of just recompiling the libraries. Other applications might be high-performance access to databases or things that are going on in the file system or elsewhere on the network. One of the neatest things that becomes possible with the WebStar API now, because of the support within the API for your plugins to do TCP/IP connections, is the ability to implement some very elaborate plugins like intelligent agents, proxies for other services, and gateways to things that aren't necessarily HTTP-based. So real quick overview of how this all works. You can basically think of plugins as snap-in subroutines for the existing web server. And from a developer's perspective, that's exactly how these things work as far as the server is concerned. When an incoming HTTP request is received by the server, it calls your plugin exactly as if it's making any other subroutine call into existing routines within the server. Your plugin is going to receive a message that tells it what it's supposed to do. Your plugin goes and does its processing, makes callbacks back to the server to have services performed on its behalf, and returns the results back through the server to the web client. A more graphical representation of this is simply that here comes the request, it goes into the server fires up a particular instance of your plugin, passes it a run message, you make the callbacks and send the results back. Where it starts to get interesting is when you consider that multiple people are going to be visiting the server at once, and it's possible for multiple versions of your plugin to be running in parallel with other plugins. And so that starts to kind of show you where a lot of the complexity is being handled by the server and your plugin doesn't have to worry about it. In the case of WebStar, there's a main thread that handles all the user interface elements and all of the Apple event processing and things that have to do with gluing the server into the Mac OS. When an incoming connection is received by the server, it starts up a connection thread that handles the communications with that incoming client connection. If that connection is a request for a service that your plugin provides, that thread will actually invoke your plugin, which means that now your plugin is running in the context of that thread. So for instance, here we have plugin number 1 running in the first slot here in the first thread. Another request comes in, plugin 2 is fired up. A third request comes in, and plugin 1 is now working. Again, and so there's 2 instances of your plugin running in 2 separate threads. Now the neat thing about the code fragment manager and the shared global space is that plugin 1's instance over here can very easily communicate with plugin 1's instance over here through shared globals that they have. So this really allows for a lot more interaction, a lot of collaboration to go in without you having to actually go to all the trouble of managing multiple threads and the communication between the threads and all that stuff. WebStar handles all of that for you. Threading inside the server from a developer's perspective, when you get your hands on the SDK, something that you need to understand is what's really going on inside of WebStar. You need to understand the context that your plugin is running in. And there are 3 basic types of threads within the server. There's the main thread, which handles all of the housekeeping and the startup and shutdown of the server, as well as communications with external applications. There's an idle thread, which is started when the server starts, and it runs in the background, and it delivers periodic time to plugins that request time to do idle processing independent of connection threads, which have a one-to-one mapping to incoming requests from clients. And those are where your CGI does the normal types of processing that it does, going out and reading a file off disk and doing some manipulation on it and returning the results to the client, going and doing a database lookup, whatever it is that your particular plugin might do. There are several different kinds of messages that are sent to your plugin from the server. On startup, you get a register message that says WebStar or in Netscape or Microsoft server saying, please tell me what you do. What are your abilities? What types of functions do you need? The initialization message happens after the server is up and running, but before incoming connections are received, and that says basically, go do any plugin-specific stuff like reading in your resources, pre-rendering any HTML, going and doing any quick database lookups that you need to do before we open the floodgates and let the clients in. The run message is the standard message that you'll normally receive, which is, here, go do your normal processing, and you may get a sub-message within there that says whether you're handling an error condition or some type of security violation or whether this is just a normal request. Your plugin also has the ability to request periodic idle time, which means that even if there's nothing going on the server, there's no incoming connections, your plugin can still get time to run and do things like run all over a directory tree somewhere and index it, or go out onto the net and periodically retrieve stock quotes, or whatever the background function is that you want your plugin or your agent or whatever to do. There are a couple of other housekeeping-related messages that come out. You get an emergency message if the server needs your plugin to free up some resources like memory or CPU time. You get a shutdown message just before the server quits so you can clean up and save any preferences that you've got and gracefully exit from your plugin. And you get a state change message when any global setting is changed about the server, any of the parameters that the user might change, or something that another plugin does that might have a side effect to your plugin. You get a state change message and it says, here's what changed. You can do something with it if you want to, or just ignore it. A lot of plugins ignore it, and in fact, some of the demos that you'll see actually have plugins saying, I got a message that was state changed and I don't care about it. A WWDC presentation would be incomplete without some source code, so here's the gratuitous source code slide. This is the data structure that's passed to your plugin along with each one of the messages, and there's complete documentation in all this source code on the CDs that you'll be able to get at the end of this presentation, so you don't have to stare at that very long. Just a few notes on how you should play in this cooperative plugin world. There are some pretty precise rules about memory usage. You don't want to do a plugin that's a bad citizen and suck all the life out of the web server by taking all of its memory or pulling all the memory out of the operating system for your own personal use. There are some guidelines for how to do it, and there are specific callbacks for memory allocation and deallocation that unless you just absolutely can't do it, you should try to stick to. Because you're still running in the cooperative multitasking environment of the Macintosh and within the thread manager, you need to make sure that you don't get off into some lengthy IO-bound application and not yield time back to the server and back to the other threads. And there are routines to help manage that as well. And from an implementation perspective, you're talking in real time back to an HTTP client over a live IP connection. You should do smart things with your IO. Don't send a bunch of 1-byte packets back to the client as you generate, keystrokes or something. You might want to buffer your data till you get a reasonable size and send it back. And also there's the facility within the API to send messages to the user on the screen or to write data to the log file. And this API has been in beta testing for about 2 months now, and we see plugins that run the gamut from never putting a message on the screen at all to ones that are just spewing stuff as hard as it can go to the status screen and to the log file. General rule of thumb is don't say anything unless it's a problem that you need the user to pay attention to. Just quietly do your thing. The server is generally reporting information to the user, and plugins should kind of try to be silent in the background. And be aware, if you're relying on global variables in your plugin, that it will be accessed concurrently, so you need to do things like semaphores to manage current access to the data if that matters in your application. Okay. I have to be careful and not click too many times. Okay. Some of the services that are available to your plugin is callbacks. We have memory management functions, as I had mentioned. Things for getting and setting server parameters. You can actually drive the server by remote control. You can change the security preferences. You can change the performance settings. You can adjust and manipulate a lot of things that have to do with how the server is behaving to suit your plugin. Now, obviously, you don't want to do that just because you can. You should only do it when you need to. There are initialization and registration functions so that your plugin can be completely self-configuring. It can define its own actions, its own suffix mappings, its own MIME types, so that from a user's perspective, they just get your plugin, throw it in the plugin folder, and it's completely self-configuring. They didn't have to do anything to install it other than a drag and a drop. This persuasion presentation is weird, so let me just click through it. There are security and process management functions. You can validate user IDs and whatnot. The HTTP communications functions are the way that you communicate back to the client in real time. You can basically send or receive data on the HTTP connection from the client and get the connection status to decide whether or not the client's still there, if they've hit the stop button and canceled or whatever. And you also have the ability to do generic TCP/IP I/O, so you can implement a function that perhaps is a proxy, like a proxy server, or a translation function, or maybe a gateway between HTTP and FTP or something like that. Jeez. Hello. Well, looks like we're stuck on this page. There it goes. There are also functions for inter-process communication. That means that you can send Apple events out of your plugin to an existing Macintosh application on the same machine or elsewhere on the net and get responses back. So you can continue to communicate amongst your applications as you might have done with your C or AppleScript CGIs. And as I said earlier, there's logging and status messages that you can use to communicate with the user. Just a few more details on the implementations. You want to let the server manage the memory for you when possible. There are these things that you get to play with called descriptors, which are conceptually similar to Apple event descriptors. You own them. Once you get one of those from the API, it's yours, and it means that you have to get rid of it when you're done with it, or you'll have a really heinous memory leak. And when you're writing portable plugins, make sure that you stick to the common subset of callbacks and you don't color outside the lines. The server will warn you if you try to make calls to WebStar specific plugins when you're talking to a Netscape server, for example. So just be aware that that can happen if you've chosen to write a portable plugin. Availability. The server that supports this will be the 1.3 version of WebStar. It has been in beta testing since, I guess the middle of March. So this API is very stable. The software development kits that you can pick up in the back of the room on your way out contain what is the frozen 1.0 API and version of WebStar that should last you through until the real WebStar 1.3 release in June of this year, which is, I guess, just next month. The compelling reason for looking at this API as a development platform in the Macintosh is that we intend to release later this summer a version of WebStar which we have a very cheesy name on right now called WebStar Lite, which is basically going to give you all the plugin functionality of WebStar 1.3, but it's going to be in a package that we're going to distribute on the internet as shareware in the same vein that Mac HTTP is distributed today, so that we really want every Macintosh user that has any interest at all in playing with a web server or running a personal server on their machine to have this software available to them, which means that you've got an instant market for your plugins of potentially every Macintosh user that has an internet connection. And then later on this summer as well, we're going to be releasing WebStar 2.0 with some enhancements to the API, such as chained plugins and some filtering functions that aren't available in the 1.3 version. So why do you want to do this from a business perspective? Well, as I said, we're going to really try to make sure that there's universal availability of this API on all the Mac platforms. It is a superset of the functions that you can do with a CGI now, so you can actually write more robust, with simpler code applications. It's a cross-platform standard, so when the glue layers are available for the target servers that you want to work with, it becomes very easy to write one plugin for multiple servers. And the webification makes it easy to take an existing application and stick it right into the server and get the communications. And it's really not that hard. We found that most people get the SDK and they look through the documentation for a couple of hours. They take one of the samples, they tweak the code a little bit, and they have their first plugin in 2 or 3 hours, really. The specific example that we'd like to go through is a chat plugin. What we've done is taken the WebStar API and used it to implement a very simple IRC-like server function that served through web pages using a normal web server instead of having to run a separate special IRC server and client pair. It uses frames in a Netscape client to handle the scrolling message area and the user input data. And as this diagram shows, the input area sends data over to the server, which is going to the chat plugin and saved in a buffer. And then each time this buffer changes, the information is pushed out in real time back to the message area, so you see it updated instantaneously. And what I'd like to do now is ask Jim Descharm from Natural Intelligence to come up and give me a hand with this demo. And we have a really neat twist on this at the end, so don't anybody get up and walk out. So what we're going to show is a version of WebStar 1.3, the same version that you get on the SDK that you'll be able to pick up. There's 2 versions on there, a normal version that you can put a key in, the key's on the disk, or a time-limited version. I think Jim has the normal version on his machine. I'm going to run the time-limited version and try to do this math problem. So help me if I screw it up. 38 and 11 is 49. There's your normal WebStar server window. You might notice that here's a message here. This is a plugin that basically notified us that it was alive. If we go back and look in the WebStar folder, it looks relatively normal, same usual smattering of web bits, except there's this plugin folder down here now. And if we look, there are some plugin functions in here. There are 4 different functions that are available. And the nice thing about these is they're all self-configuring. The user didn't have to do anything but toss them in the folder. And let me show you what that means in terms of self-configuring. I'll connect to this particular server, and we can see that those plugins went and automatically defined their own actions. So these functions are now available to users to build their own suffix mappings. For instance, you might want to send all your HTML actions off to the proxy plugin so that it can go off downstream and look it up on another machine and bring the results back. It also generated suffix mappings for the plugins, the ones that needed their own suffix mappings. You can see that they automatically generated those as well. User doesn't have to do anything at all to configure it other than throw the plugin in the folder. So let's go ahead and bring up Netscape, and we'll show you the chat plugin.
Can we get number 10 put on the screen, please?
Yeah, let's go ahead and switch to both of them now.
Are you alive?
Did I run the server? Is it still running? 32? No, you're using the wrong, it's 32.
Oh, which one is? Oh, plug in that one.
There you go.
Ooh.
Okay, so this is the basic screen here. Let me slide this up so you can see it. There's this little rotating logo thing at the top that's cheap free advertising. And we have the message area in here in the middle where the messages will show up. And down here at the bottom, we can just sign on. I'll sign on with my name. And I'll send a message to Jim. And I'll send it from my machine, and you'll see it shows up on both screens. And Jim can talk back. And so we could continue this all day long. And it's very quick. And the overhead on the server is very, very minimal. But what you'll notice, this message area is being updated constantly. And if you'll flip back to the server and look, you see that it's got a constant 2 connections up here. And that represents the server push that's going out to push the data out to the message area for all the people who are signed up for the chat session. Just to give you an idea of the amount of effort involved here, this chat plugin is a whopping 20K, and it works out to be about 18K of ANSI library and about 2K of real code. What we'd like to do is switch over here to Jim's machine, and I want to tell you about something that you may have heard about earlier this week that we think is one of the totally most cool things that we've done in a long time. We got this plugin stuff, and we're thinking, well, this is really great. People can now go do these really high-performance plugins, but it kind of competes or twists around the scripting message a little bit. But wouldn't it be really, really cool if you could take advantage of the hottest scripting language that's out there now, which is Java? So we talked to the natural intelligence guys, and they said, well, heck yeah, we can make a plugin that does Java on the server side. So what we're going to show you right now is what I think is one of the coolest pieces of technology. And guess what? It's only available on the Macintosh now. It doesn't do this on any other machine you can get your hands on. And it's going to be available really soon so you can play with it. And that is server-side Java plugins. You can write all of your what used to be your CGIs and your scripts in Java and run them with WebStar. And we're going to make that available really soon. So your pony.
Great. Okay, the first thing we're going to show you is basically the WebStar folder. As you can see, here's WebStar, and you'll notice two folders that I have put in the window. The plugins folder. First of all, you'll see Chuck's standard chat plugin that we just demonstrated, and another Java plugin. This Java plugin is not a chat Java plugin, but what this is Natural Intelligence's virtual machine. The same virtual machine that we announced yesterday, Apple has licensed from us to be the reference version of Java in the Mac OS and future versions of the Mac OS. So eventually that's where that's headed.
So what that means is that's a plugin that can run any Java applet, right? Not just a
exactly.
chat applet.
So basically you just have the one plugin. You're not going to have one plugin per Java server-side plugin. What that means is that we've created a Java folder. This is where you'll actually store the Java code that you want to run as plugins or what we used to have much more efficient CGI applications. Okay, so this folder here contains a couple different roaster projects. These two are basically the system classes I've just put in here. Eventually you won't even see those. Those will be hidden from you and stored in the plugin. But what we have here is an example of our Java chat plugin. What I'll do is I'm going to bring up this code in roaster. And actually, why don't we run through the demo first?
Yeah.
And I'll do that by starting up WebStar, my version of WebStar. And you'll notice when it comes up, it initializes the plugin and shows a real nasty message. I do everything that Chuck tells me not to. I put a whole bunch of crap on the screen. Okay, and then we're going to switch back over to Netscape.
Now, I'm gonna work the client from this side. You're not going to see what I type, but you'll see my messages show up on Jim's screen. And I'll sign on to his chat client.
Now you'll notice it looks exactly the same. I did that on purpose, okay? To show that you don't have to have Java on the front end, you don't have to have any special browser. I'm using Netscape 2.0, I don't have to use Atlas. This is the same HTML with one minor change. It's just referencing a different plugin. So I'll do this and we'll do that. And we'll do this. And you can see I did make one little change to it. I put a nice little graphic up there. Hey, I want free advertising too, so. All right, so I'm going to take a quick trip back to WebStar and just show. I break every rule and really cluttered up the screen. But basically, the point here is that I wanted to show these. These messages that you see right here are actually coming. These ones right here are actually coming from the Java code. Okay, so if we go back and look at the code,
That's not the Java plugin, that's the Java applet that you wrote,
that's
right?
the Java, what I call saplet. I don't know if that name will stick, but I think it's kind of cool. Okay, so here's the actual Java code that implemented the entire, the 2 frames that you saw in the Netscape browser. A little bit of overhead here. This section of code right here is all the code that's necessary for the actual input frame that you saw down the bottom of the screen. And the second section here is actually, this is all the code that's needed for the server push frame that you saw on the above where the messages appear. So you can see it's very, very simple, very straightforward, and only in 62 lines of code.
Not bad for an IRC server in 62 lines of code, right?
Right. And let me explain why this is very short source code and some of the advantages of a Java plugin. First of all, for each Java plugin, you don't need to write a code fragment. Therefore, debugging can be much easier because you can debug these right in your Java development environment, i.e. Roaster. Nice plug, huh? And it's also much easier because, as we all know, code fragment debugging is not exactly the easiest thing in the world. The next thing, just as Chuck's API supports, Java also supports static data. But one thing that's nice about Java is that with your static data, you don't need to implement semaphores because you have the synchronize methods here to access those static variables. Okay? So they took out all the overhead of semaphores. Another nice thing is that it has built-in threading. So just as Chuck was giving you all those warnings that don't hog the CPU and you're going to have to yield time to other threads, yield time to other plugins, you don't have to worry about that at all. You'll see no yields in here. You'll see no worry about talking back to WebStar or giving control back because remember that Java plugin is the Java virtual machine and that is what's controlling the sharing between WebStar and your Java plugins.
Now Jim, for a Java saplet, you're going to be able to make all the same callbacks back to WebStar as a normal C plugin, right?
Exactly. Just as you saw in the WebStar log in the message window, here it is right here. Here's an actual call. This actually goes back to WebStar. This is implementing a native Java call. Okay, so it's actually going back into the WebStar API.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with the API, display message is one of the API callbacks that you can make from your C code. Jim's just gone and implemented it as a built-in Java function, right?
Right. And the release version of the Java classes will actually support all of Chuck's calls. And actually what we've done is we've actually made them a lot easier to implement as well. And some of the other benefits of doing a Java plugin as opposed to writing in C is that you have the entire Java class library available to you. So it's much easier to write your code as well because you have all these nifty classes. For example, you have the Net and I/O classes, the network and I/O classes, which will allow you to do out-of-band TCP/IP connections just as you can in Chuck's API. It also has the I/O classes for file access and things like that. Same thing that you have in C, but this is also nice because if you have a Java client-side applet, you can actually have a nice connection going. You can actually have one applet that you have on both sides that acts differently whether it's on the client or on the server.
That's a really good point because it means that, for instance, if you're in an intranet environment, it becomes very easy to do custom vertical applications where you have your own client look and feel and your own server-side logic, and you didn't have to implement any of the telecommunications bits of it. The normal web client handles the HTTP connection to the web server, and your Java stuff on each end of the pipe is actually doing the customization of what's going on.
Right, and some of the other things, string and array manipulation is very easy in Java, as well as working with HTML streams, because as you know, Java is very tightly integrated into the web, so therefore you do have the URL parsers and you have the stream editors and things like that. And some other classes, like for example, ones that Natural Intelligence has written, for example, the database classes, just as Chuck had mentioned, database access in your CGIs or your plugins. With our database classes, and actually with Everywhere is also planning on doing a plugin as well for WebStar, you'll actually be able to, those two plugins, the Java plugin and the Tango plugin, will actually be able to communicate together to have your database access along with the Java classes that we've released this week. And of course, it's cross-platform. So you can actually have a common source base across all of your web servers. And the bottom line, just as Natural Intelligence has brought Java to the Macintosh first, along with Star9, QuarterDeck, we're very proud to have the first platform anywhere to support server-side Java.
Yay. So that's pretty much it for the demos. We want to make sure that people on the way out stop by the tables that are back here in the back and pick up a copy of the CD that's back there. That's the complete, well, don't get up and leave yet because we're going to have some time for questions and answers, right, Mark? But make sure that you get a copy on the way out that's got the full documentation for the API, eval versions of the server, sample code, everything you need to get started with this.
How can you see people out there? I'm blind.
Yeah, they're out there. So did we want to have some time for questions and answers, Mark?
Yeah, there's a couple of microphones in the aisles here.